Alan Carter brushed away the fine desert sand with gentle strokes of his brush. The morning sun beat down on his back as he worked in the shadow of the newly discovered ruins near Aswan. For 3 weeks, his team had been excavating what they believed was a previously unknown predynastic Egyptian site, but the markings they found made no sense. "Dr. Carter, you need to see this," called Olivia, his research assistant, from the other side of the dig. Alan stood up, his knees cracking after hours of crouching. He walked over to where Olivia was carefully removing sand from a stone panel. "I've never seen symbols like these," she said, pointing to a series of intricate markings that looked nothing like hieroglyphics. "They almost look mechanical." Alan knelt down, forgetting his sore knees. "These aren't Egyptian. They're not Sumerian, Akkadian, or anything I've ever encountered." He traced his finger just above the surface of the stone, not touching it. "And look at the precision of these cuts. They're perfectly straight, with exact angles. No ancient tools could do this." Thousands of miles away, Lisa Bennett adjusted the sensitivity on the radio telescope. The replacement for the Arecibo Observatory had been operational for only 6 months, and she was still getting used to the improved instruments. As the night shift astronomer, Lisa had the array to herself, scanning distant stars for her research on pulsar frequencies. Her screen flashed with an unusual pattern. Lisa sat up straight. She ran the standard checks for equipment malfunction and Earth-based interference. The signal remained. "That's not natural," she whispered, recording the data. The pattern repeated every 107 seconds with mathematical precision. She called her supervisor. By morning, the news had spread through the scientific community. By evening, it reached the public. The signal was artificial, coming from a point near Alpha Centauri, and it was clearly meant to be noticed. For the next 2 weeks, scientists worldwide worked to decode the message. When they finally did, it was simple. "We are the Voxari. We see you. We come in peace." In Washington, President Diane Powell addressed the nation from the Oval Office. "My fellow Americans, and all citizens of Earth, today marks a historic moment for humanity. We have confirmed contact with an intelligent species from beyond our solar system. The aliens who call themselves the Voxari have expressed peaceful intentions and a desire to establish diplomatic relations. They have informed us they will send representatives to Earth within 6 months." The world erupted in excitement, fear, wonder, and speculation. Religious leaders sought meaning. Military commanders planned contingencies. Scientists prepared questions. And ordinary people looked up at the night sky with new eyes. Back in Egypt, Alan Carter watched the president's address on his tablet from his tent at the dig site. He couldn't shake the feeling that the strange markings and the alien contact were somehow connected. His phone rang. It was the head of the archaeology department at his university. "Alan, I just got a call from the National Science Foundation. They want you to bring those strange markings you found to Washington. They're assembling a team to prepare for the alien arrival." Alan looked back at his tablet, where news channels showed artists' impressions of what the Voxari might look like. "I'll pack up right away," he said. 3 days later, he sat in a high-security meeting room at NASA headquarters. Scientists, military personnel, and government officials filled the room. The head of NASA stood at the front, pointing to images of Alan's discovery projected on a screen. "Dr. Carter's find may be the most important archaeological discovery in history. We believe these markings may be evidence of previous Voxari contact with Earth, thousands of years ago." The room fell silent. "If this is true," continued the NASA director, "then humanity's first contact with aliens has already happened, long before our recorded history began." Alan stared at the symbols he'd spent weeks studying. Had the Voxari been to Earth before? And if so, why had they left? And why were they coming back now? As the meeting continued around him, Alan couldn't help but wonder what this meant for humanity's future. The Voxari would arrive in less than 6 months. Would they come as friends, explorers, or something else entirely? Only time would tell. 6 months passed quickly. The world prepared for the arrival of the Voxari with a mix of hope and fear. New agencies formed, protocols were created, and the United Nations established a special committee for alien relations. Greg Mitchell stood at attention on the roof of the UN building in New York. As captain of the newly formed Earth Defense Force, he had been chosen to lead security for this historic meeting. He watched the clear blue sky, waiting. "Nervous, Captain?" asked the Secretary General beside him. "No, sir," Greg lied. His hand rested on his sidearm. He knew it would be useless if the aliens meant harm, but its weight was comforting. A murmur rose from the crowd below. Greg looked up. A patch of sky rippled like water, and then it appeared. A ship like nothing ever built on Earth. It was shaped like a perfect teardrop, made of what looked like blue-white crystal. It hovered silently above the UN Plaza, casting no shadow despite its size. "My God," whispered the Secretary General. The ship descended slowly. No landing gear appeared as it settled just above the ground. A portion of its side became transparent, and 3 tall figures stepped out. The Voxari stood nearly 7 feet tall. Their skin was silver blue and seemed to shimmer in the sunlight. Each had 4 arms and large, almond-shaped eyes that reflected like mirrors. They wore no visible clothing, but parts of their bodies glowed with intricate patterns that seemed to pulse with their movements. The lead Voxari stepped forward. "I am Ambassador Zilnax of the Voxari Collective. We come to meet our neighbors in this sector of the galaxy." The words didn't come from the alien's mouth, which didn't move. Instead, they seemed to form directly in Greg's mind. The Secretary General stepped forward. "On behalf of Earth and all humanity, we welcome you." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of meetings, tours, and scientific exchanges. The Voxari were shown Earth's greatest achievements: the International Space Station, the Large Hadron Collider, the most advanced AI systems. They visited the ancient wonders of the world, from the pyramids to the Great Wall. They studied human art, music, and culture. Greg watched them closely throughout. At first, the aliens seemed genuinely impressed, even friendly. But as days turned to weeks, he noticed a shift. The Voxari began to ask questions that felt condescending. "How have you survived so long with such inefficient energy systems?" Zilnax asked during a tour of a fusion research facility. "When did you realize that your binary computing was a developmental dead end?" Another Voxari asked while examining quantum computers. At a state dinner hosted by the president, Greg stood against the wall, watching as world leaders and the Voxari delegation dined together. "Your species shows remarkable resilience," Zilnax said, raising a glass of water in what appeared to be a toast. "Despite your backward methods, you've achieved much." The room went quiet. The president forced a smile. "We hope to learn much from your advanced civilization." Zilnax's reflective eyes seemed to flash. "Yes, we have much to teach you." Later that night, Greg received a call from Alan Carter, the archaeologist who had found the strange markings in Egypt. "Captain Mitchell, I need to meet with you immediately. It's about the Voxari." They met at a small coffee shop near Central Park. Alan spread photographs across the table. "I've been comparing the markings from Egypt with the Voxari written language they've shared with us," Alan explained. "Look." Greg looked at the side-by-side images. Even to his untrained eye, the similarities were obvious. "They've been here before," Alan whispered, "thousands of years ago. And these aren't just random markings. Based on where they were found and how they were arranged, I think they're warnings." Greg felt a chill. "Warnings about what?" "I don't know yet, but I'm not the only one who's noticed. My colleague Olivia has been translating more of the text. And there's something else." Alan looked around nervously before continuing. "Some of our computer systems have been accessed since the Voxari arrived. They're gathering data on us, military capabilities, resource locations, population centers." Greg leaned back in his chair. "They're not just here for friendly diplomacy, are they?" No, Alan said. I think they're here to evaluate us, and I don't think we're passing their test. Alan and Olivia worked through the night in a small lab at Columbia University. Spread across tables were photos of the markings from Egypt, printouts of Voxeri text, and dozens of notes. Look at this symbol, Olivia said, pointing to a curved mark that appeared in both sets. In the Voxeri language guide they gave us, this means subject or test subject. Alan nodded. And this group here? He pointed to another set of symbols. That's the tricky part. Based on context, I think it means genetic modification or improvement. Olivia pushed her glasses up her nose. Alan, I think they were running experiments on early humans. Alan sat back in his chair. And then they left. Why? Maybe their experiments didn't work out. Or maybe our ancestors drove them away, Alan finished. Across town, Greg Mitchell met with Frank Johnson, the top cybersecurity expert from the NSA. They sat in a secure room designed to block all electronic signals. You're sure about this? Greg asked. Frank nodded, his expression grim. I created a honeypot system, made it look like an important military database, but filled it with fake data. The Voxeri accessed it within hours of arrival. They'd been siphoning data from systems worldwide. What are they looking for? Everything. Military capabilities, resource locations, political structures. Frank pulled out a small device, but I planted a little surprise of my own. This receiver picks up their communications when they access our systems. We've been recording and translating. He pressed a button. A voice filled the room, speaking in strange tones, but the device translated. Assessment of Sol 3 progressing as planned. Humans show potential as labor force but require significant oversight. Recommend protectorate status with full integration into the collective within 5 Earth years. Greg's face hardened. Protectorate status. They're planning to take over. It gets worse, Frank said. I managed to briefly access their ship's information system. They've done this before, to at least 6 other planets. They find developing civilizations, guide their development, and eventually absorb them into their collective. The natives end up as second-class citizens at best, slaves at worst. Greg stood up. We need to tell the president. With what proof? They'll deny everything. And most people are still starstruck by our new alien friends. Frank shook his head. We need more evidence before we go public. The next morning, Alan received a call from the Voxeri delegation. They requested his presence at the UN building to discuss his archaeological findings. Olivia grabbed his arm as he prepared to leave. Be careful. Don't let them know how much we've translated. When Alan arrived, he was surprised to be led to a private room where Ambassador Zilnax waited alone. Dr. Carter, the alien's voice echoed in his mind. Your work on our previous visit is impressive. Alan's heart raced, but he kept his face neutral. So you admit you've been to Earth before? Zilnax made a gesture with his upper arms that might have been a shrug. Of course, many times over your planet's history. We helped shape your species. You experimented on us. We improved you. Without our genetic modifications, you might still be swinging in trees. The alien's reflective eyes seemed to bore into Alan. Your people have always been promising, if difficult to manage. Difficult to manage. Zilnax paced the room. Most species accept our guidance gratefully. Humans have shown resistance, even in ancient times. He stopped and turned to Alan. But that was before you understood the benefits of the collective. Alan tried to keep his voice steady. And those benefits are protection, advancement, purpose. The alien moved closer. In 1 month, we will announce that Earth has been accepted as a protectorate of the Voxeri collective. Your leaders will sign the agreement. Your people will rejoice at the opportunity. And if we refuse? Zilnax made a sound that might have been a laugh. Why would you? Your civilization is still young, still making the same mistakes others made millennia ago. We offer guidance that will save you centuries of struggle. As Alan left the meeting, his phone buzzed with a text from Greg. Need to meet. Bring Olivia. Central Park, 7 p.m. That evening, as the sun set over New York, Alan, Olivia, Greg, and Frank gathered by the lake in Central Park. They shared what they had learned. They're planning to take over Earth, Greg said, and they think we'll thank them for it. Not if we can help it, Alan replied. Our ancestors faced them once before, and somehow they drove them away. We need to find out how. Over the next week, Alan and his friends worked in secret. They knew they couldn't trust the government. Too many officials were charmed by the Voxari and their promises of advanced technology. Greg called his old friend from Special Forces, Sam Rodriguez. Sam now worked as a weapons developer for a private defense contractor. You're saying aliens want to take over Earth, and nobody is doing anything about it? Sam asked when they met at his lab outside the city. They don't see it as taking over, Greg explained. They see it as helping us, like how European colonizers helped native populations. Sam nodded grimly. So what's the plan? First, we need to understand how early humans fought them off, Greg said. Alan and Olivia are working on that. Second, we need to find weaknesses in their technology. That's where you come in. Meanwhile, Alan and Olivia flew to Egypt to re-examine the original site. They brought along a NASA engineer named Karen Williams, who specialized in ancient astronomy. These markings aren't just writing, Karen said, studying the stone panels. They're diagrams. Look at the pattern. It matches the layout of several ancient sites around the world. She laid a map on the table with red dots marking locations: Stonehenge in England, the pyramids in Egypt, Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, and dozens more. What if these weren't just religious sites? Karen suggested. What if they were built for another purpose? Olivia's eyes widened. A defense system. Back in New York, Frank continued monitoring Voxari communications. He discovered something interesting. They're avoiding certain areas, he told the group when they reunited in Greg's apartment. Places with large stone monuments, and they're using shields when they fly over these areas. Karen pulled out her notes. I analyzed the stone structures at these sites. Many are arranged to create specific sound frequencies when wind passes through them. Others align with magnetic field lines. Sound and magnetism affect them, Greg asked. Not just any sounds or fields, Karen explained. Specific frequencies. The same ones that ancient humans built into these monuments. Sam studied the data. We could replicate these frequencies, maybe even amplify them. But how would that help? Olivia asked. Even if it bothers them, they have spaceships and advanced weapons. Alan had been quiet, but now he spoke. The markings we found tell a story. The Voxari came to Earth and experimented on humans. But something happened. The humans they modified didn't behave as expected. What do you mean? Greg asked. The Voxari value order, predictability. But humans are creative, unpredictable. Even after genetic modification, we didn't follow their plan. And when they tried to force us, our ancestors found a way to fight back. Using stone monuments that generate frequencies harmful to Voxari biology, Karen added. Frank's phone buzzed. He checked the screen, and his face paled. The president is meeting with Zilnax tomorrow. They're moving up the timeline. Earth will be declared a protectorate in 3 days, not a month. We need to act now, Greg said. Sam, can you build devices to generate these frequencies? Sam nodded. I'll need Karen's help with the specifications, but yes. Frank, can you access their main ship? We need their database, everything they know about us, and their previous visits. I've been working on it, Frank said. I'm close to cracking their security. What about the monuments? Olivia asked. If they're part of an ancient defense system, can we activate them? That's why we're here, Alan said, spreading out his latest translations. These instructions explain how to activate the network. It requires specific actions at key sites around the world. Greg looked at each of them. Then we split up. Karen and Sam build devices to generate the frequencies. Frank keeps working on accessing their database. Alan and Olivia figure out how to activate the monument network. I'll try to delay the president's meeting. And if we fail? Olivia asked quietly. Greg's face was grim. Then humanity loses its independence. Forever. As they left the apartment, none of them noticed the small drone hovering outside the window. Its camera focused on their meeting. Inside the Voxeri ship, Ambassador Zil Nax watched the footage with interest. How amusing, he said to his aide. The test subjects think they can resist. Alan and Olivia flew to England the next morning. Stonehenge stood silent in the misty dawn as they approached with their equipment. They had special permission from the British government to conduct acoustic research. According to the translations, each stone has a specific resonance frequency, Olivia said, attaching small devices to key stones. When activated in the right sequence, they create a harmonic pattern. Helen checked his phone. Similar teams were in position at other ancient sites around the world. The pyramids, Göbekli Tepe, Machu Picchu, Easter Island, and more. All waited for his signal. What happens when we activate them all? He asked. Olivia shrugged. The texts just say the sky shields will rise. I guess we'll find out. In Washington, Greg met with his former commander, General Linda Reeves. She was one of the few military leaders suspicious of the Voxeri. I can't officially delay the president's meeting, she said, but I can create a security concern that will require his attention for a few hours. That's all we need, Greg replied. Just enough time to implement our plan. At a lab outside New York, Sam and Karen worked frantically to build devices based on the ancient designs. These will amplify the frequencies from the monuments, Sam explained to a small group of trusted scientists. We'll place them at strategic locations around major cities. Karen added, they work like tuning forks. Once the monument network activates, these will resonate and extend the effect. Meanwhile, Frank sat in a van near the Voxeri ship, his laptop connected to special equipment. For days, he had been probing their system, looking for weaknesses. Finally, he found one. I'm in, he whispered, though no one could hear him. His fingers flew across the keyboard as he downloaded massive amounts of data from the alien database. His phone buzzed with a text from Greg. President meeting delayed 3 hours. How's progress? Frank replied, downloading their history, tech specs, everything. Will take 2 more hours. At Stonehenge, Alan received messages from teams worldwide. All were ready. It's time, he told Olivia. He pressed the button on his device. At first, nothing seemed to happen. Then a low hum began to emanate from the stones. It was barely audible, but grew stronger by the second. Olivia checked her instruments. It's working. The frequency is building and stabilizing exactly as predicted. Similar reports came in from around the world. The ancient monuments were awakening after thousands of years of silence. Inside the Voxeri ship, alarms blared. Zil Nax rushed to the control room. What is happening? He demanded. Unknown energy pattern detected, a technician reported. It's interfering with our communications and sensor systems. Zilnax's eyes narrowed. The humans have found the old defense network. How amusing. He turned to his second-in-command. Launch our ships. Begin the formal occupation now, before they can fully activate the system. Across the globe, smaller Voxeri vessels emerged from the main ship and spread out toward major cities. At the White House, the president received an urgent call. Sir, multiple alien craft are deploying worldwide. They're not responding to communications. In New York, Sam saw the ships approaching through his binoculars. They're moving faster than expected. We need more time. Karen's phone rang. It was Alan. The monument network is at 60% power. We need at least 80 to create the shield. Frank, still downloading data from the Voxeri system, saw something that made his blood run cold. They're preparing weapons systems, he texted the others. This isn't just an occupation. It's an invasion. Back at Stonehenge, the humming grew louder. The air around the monument began to shimmer like heat waves. Something's happening, Olivia said, excitement in her voice. A beam of pale blue light shot upward from the center of the stone circle. Seconds later, similar beams appeared at ancient sites worldwide. They stretched into the sky, then began to spread like a web. Alan watched in awe. "The sky shields," he whispered. His phone buzzed with messages from other teams. The same phenomenon was occurring everywhere. In the Voxeri ship, systems began to fail. Zilnax watched in disbelief as his vessel's controls flickered. "Impossible," he said. "Their primitive stones cannot affect our technology." But they were. All across Earth, the ancient defense network awakened, creating a shield that the Voxeri could not penetrate. And in his van, Frank completed the download of the Voxeri database, the entire history and technology of their civilization now in human hands. Frank clutched the hard drive containing the Voxeri database as he ran through the streets of New York. Above him, the sky shimmered with a faint blue web of energy. The smaller Voxeri ships hovered, unable to descend further due to the shield. His phone rang. It was Greg. "Where are you?" Greg asked. 5 blocks from the rendezvous point. "The data download is complete. I've got everything. Get here fast. The president is meeting with Zilnax in 1 hour. We need to show him what we found." Meanwhile, at the United Nations, Ambassador Zilnax stood before an emergency meeting of world leaders. His usual calm was gone, replaced by barely contained anger. "This interference must stop immediately," he demanded. "The energy field your ancient sites are generating is damaging our vessels. Perhaps you could explain why your ships were deploying without authorization," asked the Secretary General. Zilnax's 4 arms moved in a gesture of dismissal, merely a precaution. "We detected unusual energy readings and responded accordingly. It looked more like the beginning of an invasion," said the Chinese representative. Before Zilnax could respond, the doors to the chamber burst open. Greg entered, followed by Alan, Olivia, Karen, Sam, and Frank. Security guards moved to stop them, but Greg showed his Earth Defense Force credentials. "Mr. Secretary General, we have urgent information about the Voxeri that must be shared now." Frank stepped forward with a laptop. "With your permission, I can display this on the main screen." The Secretary General, seeing the determination on their faces, nodded. Frank connected his computer to the display system. The screen filled with Voxeri text and images. "These are files from the Voxeri ship's main database," Frank explained. "We've translated the key sections." Alan took over. "The Voxeri have visited Earth multiple times over thousands of years. They conducted experiments on early humans, trying to create a subspecies they could control. Images appeared on screen showing ancient humans in Voxeri labs. But the experiments didn't go as planned," Olivia continued. "Humans proved too independent, too creative. We wouldn't follow their programming. So they abandoned the project," Karen added. "But not before our ancestors learned how to create defenses against them. The stone monuments we see around the world." Sam stepped forward. "And something else. The Voxeri database contains their technological history. Many of their advances were actually stolen from other species they conquered." Zilnax moved toward them, his silver-blue skin darkening with rage. "This is lies. We came to help you. Like you helped these other worlds." Frank asked, displaying images of 6 other planets the Voxeri had turned into protectorates. Each showed populations living in what looked like glorified labor camps. The Secretary General turned to Zilnax. "Is this true? Were you planning to enslave humanity?" "Not enslave. Guide. Protect. You are still primitive, still making the mistakes other species made eons ago." Greg stepped forward. "We examined your database carefully. Your civilization is actually younger than ours in many ways. You were uplifted by another species called the Centauri 10,000 years ago. You didn't develop on your own." Shock rippled through the chamber. Zilnax's reflective eyes flashed dangerously. "The difference," continued Greg, "is that the Centauri gave you knowledge freely. As equals, you plan to control us and use us." "Even more interesting," Karen said, displaying another set of data, "is that many of the principles your technology is based on were independently discovered by humans within the last decade. Our physicist Nancy Baker developed the same quantum field theory your ships use. We just haven't applied it to space travel yet." Zilnax looked around the room, seeing the changing expressions on the faces of Earth's leaders. "You need us," he insisted. "Without our guidance, you will destroy yourselves within centuries." "We'll take that chance," said the president, who had been listening quietly until now. "Ambassador Zilnax, on behalf of Earth, I must ask you and your delegation to leave our solar system." "You cannot force us to leave," Zilnax said, but there was uncertainty in his voice. Alan stepped forward. "Actually, we can. The ancient defense network is fully operational. Your ships cannot function within its field. And now we have your database, including how to maintain and strengthen the shield." Zilnax looked from face to face, seeing determination in the eyes of the humans before him. "This is not over," he said finally. "You will need us someday." "Perhaps," the president replied. "But when that day comes, we will meet as equals, not as master and servant." 1 week later, Alan stood at the edge of the Egyptian dig site, where it had all begun. The morning sun cast long shadows across the ancient stones. Their markings no longer seemed mysterious, but filled with the wisdom of ancestors who had faced the same threat thousands of years ago. Olivia joined him, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "The last Voxeri ship left our solar system yesterday," she said, handing him a cup. "NASA confirmed they've passed beyond Pluto's orbit." Alan nodded. "Do you think they'll come back?" "Someday, maybe. But we'll be ready." Around the world, things were changing quickly. The ancient monument network remained active, a constant reminder of humanity's first victory against an alien threat. But it was the Voxeri database that truly transformed Earth. In Washington, Greg and Sam led the newly expanded Earth Defense Force. Scientists from every nation worked together to understand and adapt Voxeri technology. "The president wants a progress report," Greg told Sam as they walked through a lab filled with researchers studying alien tech. Sam grinned. "Tell her we've already figured out their medical technology. Hospitals are implementing it next month. Cancer will be curable within a year. And the defense systems. Those too. But honestly, I'm more excited about their clean energy tech. No more fossil fuels within 5 years." In New York, Karen and Frank had established the Interstellar Research Division. Their mission was to prepare humanity for life among the stars. The Voxeri database mentions 57 other spacefaring civilizations. Karen explained to a room full of eager students. "Some friendly, some not. We need to be ready for all of them." Frank added, "And thanks to the database, we now have a head start on faster-than-light travel. The first human starship should be ready for testing in less than a decade." One of the students raised her hand. "Will we become like the Voxari, going to other worlds and controlling them?" Karen shook her head firmly. "No, we've learned from both their mistakes and our history. When we go to the stars, we'll go as explorers and friends, not conquerors." 3 months after the Voxari departure, world leaders gathered at Stonehenge for a historic ceremony. Alan and Olivia stood among the honored guests as the Secretary General addressed the crowd. "Today, we establish the Earth Unity Council," he announced. "For the first time in our history, all nations stand truly united. Not because of fear, but because we have seen what we can achieve together." The president stepped forward. "We also officially recognize the ancient monument network as humanity's first line of defense and a World Heritage treasure. These sites, built by our ancestors, saved us from domination. They will be protected and maintained as both our shield and our reminder." Later that evening, at a celebration in London, Alan found himself standing next to Greg, both holding glasses of champagne. "Did you ever imagine we'd be here when you first found those markings?" Greg asked. Alan smiled. "Never. I thought I'd made an interesting archaeological discovery. Instead, we found our past and changed our future." "To the future, then," Greg said, raising his glass. As the celebration continued around them, Alan slipped away to a quiet balcony. The night sky was clear, stars shining brightly. Somewhere out there, the Voxeri were probably already telling other species about the backward humans who had defied them. Olivia joined him on the balcony. "What are you thinking about?" "About how words matter," Alan replied. "They called us backward, but they failed to see that sometimes looking backward is how you find the wisdom to move forward." Olivia nodded. "Our ancestors left their mark in stone. We'll leave ours in the stars." From their quiet balcony, they could see Stonehenge in the distance, illuminated under the night sky. The ancient stones stood as they have for thousands of years, silent guardians of a species that refused to be controlled, that insisted on writing its own destiny. Humanity had been called backward, but now they were moving forward into a future of their own making, carrying the strength and wisdom of their past with them into the stars.